الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم.
Okay, I guess it's been a couple of weeks that we had a gap. Hopefully we'll be able to connect back to where we left off. Last time we met, we talked about basically the end of the Battle of Badr, how the things were dealt with, which were the result of the Battle of Badr, including treatment with the captives and how it impacted the Medina society after the victory of Battle of Badr. We talked about the distribution of the ghanima and some of the arch enemies of Islam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how they were dealt with in the aftermath of Battle of Badr. We talked about, as I mentioned, the treatment of the captives as well, which is very important from the perspective of today's time and the era we're living in, where we hear about the kind of things, the mistreatment that have been done to many of the captives in the world today. Even though we talk about many of the so-called international laws, they kind of protect the people, but today we see otherwise. While in the time of Rasulullah, which was about 1400 years ago, we see the treatment that was given to the captives by the Muslims was a great example for many people to learn from. And it's not the genius of, to say it's not the genius of Muhammad sallallahu or the Sahaba, it's a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were following what was given by Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's what we called for as well. So even when we are talking about the battlefield, that does not entitle us, it did not entitle Muhammad sallallahu or the Sahaba to break any of the laws from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And this is how we look at it, even when we talk about the battlefields even. Okay, so and after that, the impact on the Islamic society was since there were mushrikeen still there, polytheists who were still living in Medina, who were they were not necessarily the enemies directly of Rasulullah and the Sahaba, but they were more of still stuck to their previous religion, what they were following, and when they saw the victory of the Battle of Badr, that had an impact, and they were the ones who were, you can think of, kind of at the borderline, were just watching which way the Islam goes, which way the newly formed government of Rasulullah goes, and many of them entered the fold of Islam as well after the Battle of Badr. That was the impact of that. But at the same time, there was negativity also involved, and that includes, and this is what we'll talk about from today, and we'll start something today, which is those different battles that happened between the Muslims and the Mushrikeen of the Makkah, after the Battle of Badr until the next major battle, which was Ghazwat Uhud. Ghazwat Uhud was the next major battle, but it's not that there were no other battles happening between. There were other battles that happened as well. And we'll talk about a couple of them. Let me just go over what we'll talk about today. So we'll talk about the military activities between Badr and Uhud. That includes Ghazwat Bani Salim, as well as Al-Qudr. And there was an attempt on the life of Rasulullah to assassinate Muhammad sallallahu. And that was also because of the aftermath of Badr. So all these things we're talking about today and in next week will be the side effect, we're going to call it, or the aftermath of the Battle of Badr, how the kuffar, that include 4 different groups, we'll talk about that as well today. They look at the Rasulullah and the newly formed state of Rasulullah. We'll talk about the attempt on the life of Rasulullah, Ghazwat Bani Qaynuqa. Bani Qaynuqa, as we talked about, that was one of the major tribes of the Jews who were living in the outskirts of Medina. We'll just talk about the things that led to the Ghazwat Bani Qaynuqa today because of the time also. But we'll continue from Bani Qaynuqa next week as well. Okay, as far as the activities go, so after the Battle of Badr was the first major battle that happened between Rasulullah and the Muslims and the Makkans, the Quraysh. to be specific, polytheist. And this was the decisive war in which the Muslims were victorious. But that led to for the kuffar to show their true colors in many cases, if you call them. That included the Jews who were keeping the animosity against the Muslims in Medina. They were hypocrites, the munafiqeen who were living in Medina, and they were led by Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul. Even though his other family members did become Muslim, including his own son Abdullah, but he continued to be the leader of the munafiqeen or the hypocrites. We talked about that just to be very clear. When we say munafiqeen in this context, has a very clear meaning. Munafiqeen means a munafiq is a person who outwardly shows to be a Muslim, but in his heart he is not a Muslim. Okay, and we talked about that as well. We do not judge people like that to say that person or that person is a munafiq, because we do not know the matter of heart. Yeah, this is why what we saw that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed us continue to deal with those munafiqeen as you deal with the Muslims. Okay, outwardly you have to deal with them as when somebody comes up and say that he is a Muslim and he does the actions of a Muslim. Of course, you deal with them as a Muslim. Even though Rasulullah was told through the wahy who were the munafiqeen in Medina, but he continued to deal with them as Muslims. This is an important aspect to understand, because we do not know what's in the hearts of anybody, right? Only a person knows. So that should not make us making stupid mistakes, silly mistakes, to deal with a person who is who can be a threat in certain cases. Yeah. But you have to deal with them as Muslims. The reason, well, one of the things you can think of it, if that would have been left to the people to judge who was a munafiq, you can see how much of a chaos it can create. Yeah, because anybody can start saying that a person is a munafiq, and then you start dealing with him as a non-Muslim or something. Yeah, and that's true for the time of Rasulullah. He was given the wahy by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could have acted that way, but we see that he dealt with them as a Muslim, but if it was known, of course, Rasulullah was warned about those people. So the care you can see that was taken by Rasulullah that not to be fooled by the people who are acting like that. Okay. Now, in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal actually talks about the two categories of people from whom you see the more animosity compared to Nasara. Actually, it says that you will find them more severe towards you in animosity. Who are those two people? Yahud and the Mushrikeen. And you will find the one who call themselves as Nasara. They are close to you. And and among them you will find them priests and monks because they are not arrogant. And actually, this when you read the tafsir of this ayah, you see that this was actually talked about some of the people from Habasha. They came to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we know that the people in Habasha, they were Christians, and the delegation came from Najashi to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when Rasulullah presented to them Islam, they did become Muslim as well. The one who came from Habasha. Okay, so the reason I'm bringing this up is you see that these were the people who really showed animosity towards Rasulullah in Medina, especially after Medina, after the Battle of Badr. So they started doing different kinds of actions to provoke each other and to provoke others also, and to incite animosity towards Rasulullah and the Muslimin in Medina and in Makkah as well. Okay, so now when this kind of animosity that we're creating, that actually led to Ghazwat Uhud, the Battle of Uhud, the next major battle that happened between the Muslims and the Mushrikeen. One key thing which is mentioned by Al-Makhtum, the author, also is mentioning that Muslims are always obliged on lookout for any hostile movement. See, this is what you see in the whole Medina era of Rasulullah, and even in Makkah also. Rasulullah was a very well-aware person. He was not the one who would not be aware of what's happening around him. So he was gathering information all the time, and hence he was also, you see that he was continuously aware of the surrounding of the Medina, and hence we find preemptive strikes were done by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. Unlike many a times we hear things as if Muslims or Islam is supposed to be only fight back. They only fight back in the sense of when they are under attack. No, there are, you see in the instances of Rasulullah sallallahu like that, there were preemptive strikes done by Rasulullah sallallahu ahead of time when we found out that these are the things were happening against the Muslims and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as I mentioned, this is mentioned in Al-Raheeq Al-Makhtum as well. When you go back to this section, these military activities between Badr Uhud, you can see that. Now, when it comes to Ghazwat Bani Salim al-Kubra, this is one of those preemptive strikes by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, as we have discussed that previously, Rasulullah used to send Sahaba to do on a scouting trip. Scouting means to go and gather information in the surroundings of the Medina. And it was reported by Banu Salim of the Ghatafan. Ghatafan was the major tribe. Of the Ghatafan, there was a clan, which was Bani Salim or Banu Salim. They were the one who were trying to muster a war against Rasulullah and the Sahaba and the Muslims in general. So Rasulullah took and initiated himself. See that this is the part I'm trying to make here to make me understand that he did not wait for them to come over Medina, attack them, and then after that you start thinking of okay, how can we defend ourselves? No. Rather, Rasulullah went out on his own against these people who were prepared to fight Rasulullah. Okay, so now when Banu Salim found out that Rasulullah is on his way to meet them, they actually they ran away, and they ran away, but they left spoils of war that included about 500 camels, and 500 camels is a pretty big spoil of war, especially for Rasulullah and Sahaba at that time. We're talking about still the second year after the hijrah of Rasulullah, and the time was difficult for the Sahaba still. And that was distributed among the Sahaba according to the rules that were revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we talked about the Battle of Badr, that 1/5 of the spoils of war that goes to Allah and His Messenger and the yatam and masakin, and the people who are orphans in need, meaning it goes to the state, and then from there, whoever is running the state affairs will be distributing that among the needy and the people who are in need of this kind of help to run the affairs of the state, basically. So that was done by Rasulullah. Each person got about, I think it said 2 camels. Each one gave two camels. Okay, this happened in the second year after Hijrah in the month of Shawwal. Shawwal means Battle of Badr happened in the month of Ramadan. We talked about that last week, right? Well, a couple of weeks ago. So, and then this happened in Shawwal, which means that it's almost back to back. Going to next month, there's another battle that's happening. And in between there was Eid, as we celebrate. This was the first Eid that the Muslims celebrated. And then, as usual, when Rasulullah left Medina, he left somebody to take care of Medina as well. Okay, so in this case, it was Siba' bin Urfata and Ibn Al-Makhtum were left to take care of the Medina. Now, the reason I always talk about this, so we keep this in mind. There's the affairs of the state need to be run when the Rasulullah is away from the state. So he always left it. We don't find this kind of action by Rasulullah when he was in Mecca. That's a distinction, because in Mecca Rasulullah was not a ruler, while in Medina he was. So hence he had to do that. Other thing to keep in mind is, as a reminder, so we talked about that Ghazwa is a term that was used for a battle in which Rasulullah himself participated, and he led the army. And the cases where he sent a Sahabi to lead a Ma'raka. Ma'raka is a term used for any battle, but in which Rasulullah sent a Sahabi to lead an army is called Sariyah. Okay, so this remind us since we are coming back after a couple of weeks. Okay, now, so that this is what happened in the surrounding of the Medina. Ghatafan was close to Medina. Now, talking about, Banu Salim is the clan of Ghatafan, so we're talking about Ghatafan. Now, another thing is an attempt of the life of Rasulullah happened, or assassination attempt was done. That is from the Meccans. Now, when the Meccans went back, there were, of course, they were boiling up because of the loss they had in Badr. Many of their leaders, they lost their lives. So we talked about the people who are around Medina, which are actually, we talked about Ghatafans, we talked about Bedouins who are living there. One of the reasons that they were boiling, even though they were not directly impacted, but indirectly they did. They were impacted because when Rasulullah was there now, running the state affairs of the Medina, now these Bedouins, they used to be the one who would be looting any kind of a caravan or something is passing by, and they are making the money out of this way. And now they knew that there's a stable state in Medina, they would not be able to run their affairs the same way anymore. Hence, for them, that's a threat. So they were going after Rasulullah and the Muslims because of that. So when it comes to Meccans had a hatred because of the battle that they lost against Rasulullah. And so when this happened, some of those mushrikeen, that included Umar bin Wahab al-Jumahi, and whose son was one of the captives of the Badr. And he wants to go and release him, but at the same time he was boiling out of anger of all the losses that the mushrikeen had in Battle of Badr. Other person was Safwan bin Umayyah. So Safwan bin Umayyah is the one who lost his father. His father was Umayyah bin Khalaf. We talked about that at the last meeting. And his brother, both of them were killed in the Battle of Badr. So now, Umar met Safwan and they were talking about the whole thing about the loss in Badr. And Umar said, well, he would have gone himself and taken care of Rasulullah if he did not have the debt and he did not worry about the family behind him who will take care of the family. So Safwan, who was of course one of the rich people of the Medina, he was of Makkah, who was the son of Umayyah bin Khalaf, one of the leaders of the Makkah, he said that he gave him this promise that he will take care of his debt and will take care of his family if Umar goes and take care of Rasulullah or assassinate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Umar agreed and he wanted to go and kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he entered in Medina, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu saw him. And when he saw him, even though he came to see his son, to free his son, Umar realized that there is something is wrong with this guy. He is not here with good intentions. And this is an important thing for a Muslim to understand. And Umar is famous for that, which is called the Firasa of Umar. Firasa is something which is the intuition. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to the believers whoever He wishes. And he was able to detect that there is something is wrong. Now, he did not just leave that, okay, there's something is wrong, I feel something is wrong. He went to Rasulullah and he went to Rasulullah and informed about that Umar is here, and he does not think that he is here with the good intentions. Okay? And if anybody has read the life of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu in any of the books, this is one of the things that have been mentioned about Umar al-Khattab. In many incidents that you will find that Umar was able to detect things that was, you cannot tell without any knowledge. He did not have knowledge, but he was able to sense something. And it's not like, don't think of it, I'm trying to say by any means that he is getting wahi or something. Of course not. Wahi was close with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no more wahi after him. It's more of, sometimes even as us, we can think of it, that we can look at certain people, the way they're behaving, or the way they carry themselves, you can tell, okay, there is something about this person. Even sometimes you can tell about a person without even knowing he's a Muslim or not. You can tell, you feel like this guy seems like a Muslim. Yeah. And of course, for sisters it becomes very easier with the hijab and all that. You can say that, but even sometimes you can tell even a sister does not have a hijab on, Sometimes you can tell if she's a Muslim. But this is just the intuition part I am talking about. And this is because of built on certain kind of a knowledge that you have about the behavior of the people, and then you are able to do that. You can tell, you can guess certain things. Not necessarily you'll always be right, but Umar was one of those people who had this intuition. And there's a hadith about this. Rasulullah says, "Ittaqu firasat al-mu'min فَإِنَّهُ يَنْظُرُ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ." That watch out, be careful of the firasa, or the intuition of the believer, because he sees through the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here means the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the knowledge that Allah has given to us. When you use that knowledge that Allah has descended on Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that can help us do certain things, and that's what is referred to. This hadith is, as a matter of fact, it is in response to the ayah Rasulullah said this, "Inna fi dhalika la'ayatin lil-mutawassimin," that surely in this are signs for those who see. This hadith is reported by Jami' al-Tirmidhi. Now, continuing on, when this happened, when this Umar came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to meet. So now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came to him and he said, "Sabah al-Nur," and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Okay, I can teach you better greeting than that," which is "Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh," which we know of a greeting of Islam, and it's a greeting of the people of the Jannah as well. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him about his objective, why Umar was here. And Umar, his response was, he was there for his son. He came to see his son, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed also towards his sword that he came with. And his response was, "This sword is the one that has destroyed us. Look at us, we were basically the same family and all that, from the same tribe, and we are ended up in this situation that we are fighting with each other." So now, he did not want to say why he was there for. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam revealed his intentions. Now, when Umar made this intent to come and kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the only two people who was aware of was Umar and Safwan. And now Umar was surprised. He was astonished about that. How Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew about this. Meaning, he realized he must be getting some information from other means. Talking about, he realized that he is really the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he accepted Islam because Rasulullah sallallahu giving him the details of what they discussed. What Safwan and Umar discussed, and this was between two people only, nobody else knew. So now he became Muslim, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam not only freed his son but also told the companions to teach him about Islam, and he became a good Muslim as a matter of fact. And Safwan on the other side, waiting for Umar to come back to hear the news that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been assassinated. Now when he comes back, for his surprise, not only that he came back as a Muslim, but he became one of the think of it as the one who started doing the da'wah of Islam to the kuffar over there. And many people entered into fold of Islam because of Umar. And this that reminds you of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in many different occasions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they plot and Allah is planning, and Allah is the best planner. So Umar was on his way to kill Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he comes back as one of the defenders of Islam. We talked about Umar before, the very same way. He was on his way to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He comes back and becomes one of the greatest Muslims of the time of history actually. And later on, he became one of the leaders of Muslims as well. Okay, now. Next thing that happened was Bani Qaynuqa. So when it comes to Bani Qaynuqa, we talked about that Bani Qaynuqa was one of the tribes, Jewish tribes, that was living in the outskirts of Medina. Now, unfortunately, Jews had this tendency of making plots, different kinds of plots, especially against prophets. We see that in the Quran, have many stories that we mentioned, how they treated the different prophets. Even they tried to kill Isa alayhi salam. And the different other stories talk about Bani Israel did kill many of the other prophets as well, as the Quran mentions. Now here, one of the things that happened was Shas bin Qais. He was one of the elderly Jews, And when he saw that after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam victory in Badr, and then he saw Aus and Khazraj, two tribes of major tribes of Medina, who used to fight with each other all the time. And the Jews in Medina actually were the beneficiary, because they were supplying the arms to both sides, they were supplying loans to both sides, and they were under the debt of them, and continuously buying arms to fight with each other for decades. Especially the Mu'ath was one of the major battles that happened between them. So what he did was he sent one of the youth to go among the Aus and Khazraj and start reminding them of how they used to fight with each other. Even though now they're close to each other, they're Muslim, but there's a brotherhood being established by Islam, but he started reminding them to a point. Both the tribes, they were about to start a war again against each other, and they were prepared. They put their arms and everything on. They were going to fight with each other, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed of this specific incident that was about to happen. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he went to the Muslims at that time, and he reminded them that how Islam actually saved them, protected them. He said, "O Muslim, do you still advance pre-Islamic arguments, which is the Jahiliyyah? After I have been sent to you as messenger, remember that it is not rightful for you to turn backward after Allah has guided you to the straight path, delivered you from disbelief, and created enmity between you." Now here, the love between you. So now here, what I was talking about is that was sufficient for the Sahaba to stop what they were about to start. See, that one reminder was sufficient for them. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jalla reminded in the Surah Al-Baqarah as well, when He says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, that hold on to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do not get into differences. This ayah is the one that's talking about Aus and Khazraj were at the brink of entering into the hellfire. And Allah is the one who protected them and created brotherhood between them. Now, I want to take a pause here. I don't want to go too much into the battle of Kainuqa. As I said, I'll talk about it next week. But this is an important point to understand. We are talking about Sahaba, Ridwanullah. They are the ones who are about to fight with each other. It's a big thing to think about. That Sahaba were going to fight with each other. How can this? We cannot even imagine this, right? But the thing is, this is how the human mind works. Don't forget that. Even if we know of something, let's say a haram ways of doing things, or you have done something in the past. Now you have learned about Islam and you are able to control your desires or your action that you have done in the past. But that does not mean whatever you saw in the past or whatever you have done in the past is deleted from your brain. It's still there. The information is still there. And that information can be used again. If you are at a weak point or something, or somehow you are disconnected with the right thoughts, the very wrong ideas can cause you to act wrongly as well. So this is why it's very important for us to always be surrounded with good people. So good people will always remind us of doing something good. So suhbah is important, companionship is important. Otherwise, if you are not in a good environment, then the bad environment is keep feeding you bad information also, wrong things. And that can lead somebody to act incorrectly as well. I'm not saying the Sahaba were in the wrong environment or company, but there are people who came and tried to incite a war. Some reminded them of something from the past. Some ideas they were rooted in, they went through, they lived their life. So now they were able to incite, use the very same emotions to the point that the Sahaba were going to fight with each other. But it took only Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam few words to remind them of what really they are getting into, what kind of jahiliyyah thoughts are controlling their behavior at that point. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the ayat and of course gave a small talk, and that was sufficient for the Sahaba to return back, and they did not act in the jahiliyyah manner. It is an important aspect for us to think about, even though in the book it is just mention a few, I think half a page or something, but it's a very important incident that happened. So we should also remember that we can make mistakes. That's what I'm trying to say. Humans make mistakes. Even a good person can make a mistake, right? But the thing is, if you're told before you have making a mistake, also remind you of that this is the wrong thing, then it should be enough for us to prevent ourselves to be engaged in that. And even if we have made a mistake, we should return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the good deed, and if somebody has done a mistake, I've mentioned this hadith many times in the past as well, that if somebody makes a mistake, Rasulullah said, then follow it by the good deed. Good deeds erases the bad deeds. Yeah? This hadith also. And you don't find, by the way, that a bad deed is erasing the good deeds. This is a rahmah from Allah. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A good deed can erase the bad deed. Bad deed does not erase the good deed. Of course, unless the bad deed is kufr, bad deed is shirk, bad deed is because if a person does not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he rejects the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not have the iman, then everything is lost. Yeah? So that's a different kind of a bad deed though. Okay, I think that's all I have for today. And if there is any questions or comments about what is discussed, inshallah, I'll try to answer them. We'll talk about Bani Qaynuqa in more detail about what exactly happened. Inshallah, if there is, but for any question about what we discussed today, I'd like to